evening, Papua New Guinea, and welcome to a brand new year and a new episode of Business PNG. Now, 2017 is expected to be another big year for the country, with the upcoming PNG Games, the 2017 national elections, as well as further preparations for next year's APEC Summit. Business PNG will be in the front line to report on all these. But on tonight's episode, we speak to UN Country Coordinator Roy Trivedy at last year's Mining and Petroleum Conference in Sydney. He was at the conference to meet with industry leaders to discuss partnerships to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Tonight on the show, we have Mr. Roy Trivedy, the resident coordinator for the UN in Papua New Guinea. Thank you so much, sir, as always, for your time.
Great to be with you, Leanne, and great to be again on the show, which is doing a fantastic job.
Thank you, sir. So you're here in Sydney to meet with some of the stakeholders, the heads of oil and gas companies here at the 14th Mining and Petroleum Conference. Tell us a little bit about what you will be meeting with them about.
Right. So this mining conference is taking place at a really important time. We are less than 7 months away from our elections in the country, as we know. We are a year and a bit, maybe 6 months, year and 6 months away from the APEC, really important for the country. And actually, we're also a year into the Sustainable Development Goals. So what I'm trying to do is to talk to the chief executives and their companies about how do these things come together? How can we work together, not just for the next year or 2 years and so on, up to the APEC, but beyond, looking at the road to 2030 and actually PNG's Vision 2050 document. How do we make some things happen, particularly on improvements in human development in the country?
So how do you think that these big corporations can help with, the national development goals that we have?
My first thing that I'll be saying to them is that, look, at one level, these mining companies and so on have made are making an incredible contribution to Papua New Guinea's growth. Okay, there's no doubt about it. Papua New Guinea would not be in the position it's in without the role of extractives and so on.
That's true.
The other side of that is that, of course, while growth has been taking place, a lot of the human development indicators, education, health, and so on, have not been improving sufficiently fast. And mining, despite all of the huge impact it makes in terms of growth, only provides for 5% of income, of employment in the country. So we need to think about what more can the extractive industries do to contribute more. And when we come to the APEC, I think all of us want to be in the position where we can say, in Papua New Guinea, these mining companies are not only contributing to growth, but they're doing a number of other things that are changing and transforming people's lives. So I'll be talking to them about, the fact that despite the growth, we have 87% of our people do not have electricity.
Yeah.
We have, high levels of illiteracy still, both in terms of literacy, but also numeracy is weak. We have, roughly 30% plus of our people who don't have sanitation, proper sanitation in their homes. So these are some of the things that we will be talking about. Well, what more can we do? And I think one of the propositions I'll be putting to these chief executives is to say, look, each company is doing some incredible work in your own project area. So if you go to Hides, you will see the difference that Exxon is making. If you go to the Oil Search Corporation's sites, you will see the difference they're making. The Octedi people, across the country, there are many different things, good things going on. The difficulty is that while those things are going on in the project sites, in other parts of PNG, very little is happening. And so we're getting a very uneven development landscape. And what that will do in the long run, if it's left, is cause more inequality and conflict and so on. So the thing that I'll be talking to them about is what can we do collectively, all of us together, to try and make sure that we actually not only make a difference in your project sites, but to the country as a whole. And I think we can do a lot better than we've done over the last 2 decades. So things like, sanitation, we can make a difference. If we start to pull together and so on, we can really transform. We can make sure every household in Papua New Guinea has at least a pit latrine and so on. We can make a difference on things like introduction of renewables to make sure every single household has at least some light in the evenings, so that will improve education outcomes, it will improve a whole range of other things. We can do a whole range of things on things like smokeless cookers. I was in the youth area earlier this year. Fantastic things that the community is doing. And in the evening, we were sitting around a campfire and so on, and people were cooking. And you could see people have huge amounts of smoke. There's a lot of issues around respiratory illnesses, eye illnesses, and so on. And these are technologies that are available. We just need to make sure they're brought into Papua New Guinea at a certain level. And once people see them, we will get our own craftspeople making those smokeless stoves. So I think these are some of the things that I want to say to the chief executives. Look, through collective action, we can do this. And we have a term called the Business Coalition for the Sustainable Development Goals. And I would like each of them to sign up to this.
Sure.
I would like to form a board where we commit certain level of funds which can then match other funds so that we can start to make this difference over the next 15 years, right up to 2030. If we do this, Papua New Guinea can achieve many of the sustainable development goals, but it will only be through collective action. We can't just leave it to every organization to do its own thing. So I will be putting some propositions to them, and I hope that they are going to support it. Many of them are, very supportive, I know already. But this is the way in which we can make sure that, the country progresses faster on some of these big development challenges, and that everybody benefits. Leanne, in most countries, there are two ways in which nations deal with this. One is through the tax system. Okay, and companies pay royalties and taxes, individuals pay royalties and taxes, and then from that, the government provides services across the country. Unfortunately, our tax system, it's working but not functioning very well. We need to make sure together we rebuild the tax system,
and
help
also
them.
a lot of the companies have tax holidays,
Absolutely. So we, and on the one hand, that might benefit a company in the short run or maybe for 20 years or so on. But I think it is not very responsible for companies to continue to keep getting that benefit without thinking, okay, what more can we do to build the tax base, which is going to be the future of the country? So I think we have to put more emphasis on tax. The other is, of course, the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And I think in this meeting so far, in the conference, we have not had very much discussion of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We know that part of the reason for that is the economic downturn, because at the moment, we don't have money to put into it. But I think that is a mistake. It is precisely now we have to get the Sovereign Wealth Fund set up, established. Let's try and get some funds in there so that people can see that this is the long-term guarantee for things like better services and so on. Earlier this week, I had a strange thing that happened to me. I had a text message from a person who has spinal difficulties up in the Highlands. And he sent me a text message because he saw what I'd been saying around disability and so on. He said, look, I've got spinal problems. I can't move around. I'm trying to get in touch with somebody who can help. So I gave him some contact details. A few days later, he came back. He said, a week later, I haven't heard anything. So I then said, okay, let me just see what I can do. I sent his details to Secretary Anna Solomon. And Anna Solomon, she was very, very good. immediately replied to me saying, look, we actually probably could go and do an assessment, but we have difficulty, and we even have wheelchairs and things that can help. Our problem is we don't have the money to be able to transport even the support that we have for disabled people to the right places. So, these are very simple things. There are companies here represented in this conference who can easily help with the logistics. It's actually a great win for any corporation to say, and we're doing something to help some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. And so I want to put this to the Business Coalition for SDGs and say, let's try and reach people who are perhaps the furthest away from services, who need them the most. And that's where we will begin to see how the extractive companies and all the other companies in Papua New Guinea can make a real difference to people's lives. If by the time we get to APEC, we have enough examples of these things, actually implementing them, then we can stand tall and say, our companies not only are encouraging and fostering growth in the economy, but we are transforming people's lives as part of a longer term change over the next 30 years to the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals agenda, but also beyond that, right up to 2050, the vision that the country has, our leaders have, to help achieve that.
Okay. I want to get back to what you said. I just want to pick at something you mentioned, the number you mentioned about the resource companies only contributing to 5% of employment.
Yeah.
Where did you get that number, and can you speak a little bit about that?
Of course. 2 years ago, we launched this report, the National Human Development Report.
Yep.
And the report was called From Wealth to Well-Being. And when we started the report, we looked at, where was the growth coming from in Papua New Guinea? And the conclusion very quickly was, look, a lot of the growth in Papua New Guinea is due to the extractives, the mining, and so on.
Sure.
Fantastic. We are a very rich country. We have incredible resources. All of the things that we have, and this little bit of the diagram, 70% of mineral resource, 2.6% of world gold production, 7% of world's biodiversity, tuna stocks, we have oil, gas, etc. What we found was since independence, the extractive companies alone contributed 150 billion kina to the country's development.
Okay.
What we then looked at was, well, how is that actually can we see some of that wealth? And sadly, the conclusion we came to was, well, the first way you see it is through employment. And if you look across those years, we did a time series analysis, we looked at how many people were employed in the mining sector and so on. We found that, that all of that mining was contributing 5% of employment in the country. That doesn't mean, and of course part of the first phase of the mining and extractives and the LNG was also employing, skilled labor from overseas. So there were more people, and then some of them went back and so on. But in terms of Papua New Guinea, only 5%. And the way in which mines operate is not just the people that you directly employ. It's also all the supply chains into the mines. So if you need fencing, if you need food for your employees and so on, who provides that? Local companies and so on. So you're also looking at the supply chains and so on. But overall, the figure was 5%. Now, 2 years later, right, part of the reason why I'm here today at the conference is to say, okay, what has happened since 2014 when this report was done? And what I'll be doing is I'll be congratulating the chief executives to say, look, on the one hand, you are doing some amazing things in terms of contributing to growth at a time when the economy is, and of course, world commodity prices have been hit. It's very important that you continue that. And if we look at also what's happening in your own project sites, as I say, you are investing in education, you're investing in some social protection measures, you're investing in infrastructure, and so on. But that by itself is not going to be enough, because what we're starting to see is growing inequality in the country. So some areas, things are working, schools are working, health posts are there. But there are many areas of the country, and the best example is you go to Western Province and parts of, rural Kandap and so on in the highlands, and you just see how people are living. And I have a short film that I'm going to show them as well about how ordinary Papua New Guineans are living, with many of them without basic sanitation facilities, most of them without electricity, and most of them without even, basic technology for cooking and so on. So these are the things that I think the large corporations we can do better on. And the UN system is willing to work with everybody. We can make this happen. If we put our minds to it, between now and the APEC, we can begin to show some initial results. And beyond that, right up to 2030, we can make sure the country is well positioned for the SDGs. So nobody can say that, unlike with the Millennium Development Goals, we did our best, but we couldn't make it. This time round, we cannot let that happen.
Okay.
I have on my desk right now, Leanne, an incredible proposal in 3 key provinces to really strengthen renewables. So micro hydro, using solar and so on. Okay, it needs counterpart funding of 17 million kina. It's a 3-4 year program financed through UNDP and the Global Environmental Facility. Okay, but they can only release the larger share of the money if we get counterpart funding. Okay. Given the state of the current economy, of course, government is not able to provide that. So I would be putting this to the chief executive, saying if we have a business coalition and you put some money on the table, those are the things that can help people, every family there, to have at least one light in their family. And these things make a big difference to all kinds of outcomes.
I just wanted to bring your attention onto, I know the UN and you're very vocal about renewable energy. I wanted to just bring your attention, get your opinion on coal mining and the sort of debate that's going on in the country about mining coal in the country and using that as a source of energy. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts on that are very straightforward, actually. Look, Papua New Guinea is one of the few countries that has enormous wealth of renewable energies. We should be investing in that rather than doing coal mining, because we know that if we do coal mining now, not only will it will compromise our position in terms of global warming, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and so on. It may create some jobs in the short term, but that is not the future. We have to find what I keep referring to in discussions with chief executives. Papua New Guinea is at a unique stage where if we use leapfrog technologies, we don't have to use the technologies of the past and so on. We can use the technologies that are there which will position our country not just for the next 4 or 5 years or decade, but for the next 20, 30 years. That's what we need to be investing in. Yeah. So let's invest in renewables. It's fine, leave the coal in the ground. Okay, it won't go away. Let's try and really focus where we know the majority of our people can benefit, and that is through renewables.
Thank you, sir, for that. Did you have any additional comments?
No, look, this thing, I'm talking today to chief executives and so on, okay? But this thing cannot happen just by companies and governments and UN system and so on. Yeah. It needs every citizen to take an interest in it. It needs every citizen to be saying to the companies and to the corporations and to government, look, please make this happen. Get this business coalition for the SDGs started, because that will be the thing that will help this country, our country, to really make progress between now and the year 2030. We're not thinking of it in 3-4 year programs. This is a 15-year journey, which will then transcend right up to 2050. It's great having good visions, but the challenge is always to translate those visions into practice and reality. And this is where it begins. And every citizen has an important role to play to please ask your MP, we're coming to elections, those standing saying, are you for this business coalition? Yeah. And if they are, support them, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Trivedy, for your time.
Yeah, great to be with you again.
As always, thank you so much. And that's all from us tonight. For more business news, or if you would like to view this episode again, visit EMTV online at the URL at the bottom of the screen. Or for up-to-the-minute business news and updates, like our page on Facebook or follow us on the Twitter handle at Business PNG. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leon Gerari, and this was Business PNG.